In a rare move this week, Umar Zamir, the man charged with killing Constable Jeffrey Northrup, took the stand to give his version of events. And joining us live here to help us dig deeper into the evidence presented so far at the trial is criminal defense lawyer Daniel Brown. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. And you know, we saw Umar Zamir, who just wrapped up his testimony yesterday at his own first-degree murder trial. How significant is it that he actually took the stand?
Well, I think certainly he has nothing to prove here. It's the prosecution that has to prove everything in this case. We've heard from Mr. Zamir's wife. We've already heard from accident reconstructionists that would support really some of his account, but we haven't heard from him. And I think sometimes that's a really important thing for the jury to have, his own words, his own actions, and most importantly, they heard an apology from Mr. Zamir to the Northrup family for the loss of their father, the loss of the husband. It was a really tragic case, and he wanted to explain how he ended up in this situation where he, what he says, accidentally ran over this police officer.
Right. A very emotional apology was presented in court yesterday. And a lot of the Crown's argument really focuses on Zamir intentionally hitting Jeffrey Northrup with his vehicle. Northrup, of course, was plainclothes at the time, along with the other officers with him. But there was a lot of that argument that this was intentional, and that it was done even after Northrup and his partner identified themselves as police officers. But you mentioned the evidence of the reconstructionists saying that, you know, Northrup seemed to be already on the ground at the time when he was fatally struck. How is the Crown now trying to continue presenting that side of things, that he was intentionally up? What evidence have they put forward to show that?
Well, they have 3 police officers who claim that they were eyewitnesses. They claim that they saw the officer put his hands up, he stood in front of the police vehicle. But we have to remember, this police officer was very large, 6'3", almost 300 pounds. And both the Crown attorney's accident reconstructionist and the defense attorney's accident reconstructionist both said if somebody like that had been struck with the vehicle and struck the way the police officers described it, there would have been damage on that vehicle. You can't hit somebody and not cause some sort of damage to the vehicle. So it then begs the question also, why is Mr. Zamir running from the police? Why, if he knew that these were police officers, he hadn't done anything wrong, he was out for an evening with his wife and child, why wouldn't he stop from the police? Why would he be running from them? And so really there isn't a cohesive theory. I mean, the only one that does make sense is Mr. Zamir's, that he didn't know that this was a police officer. He thought he was being robbed. He was in a dark, dimly lit garage after midnight in downtown Toronto, and people were approaching his car. And again, back to this 6'3", 300-pound man, that might be intimidating to somebody in Mr. Zamir's situation.
Right. We know as well that, as you said, Mr. Zamir and his wife, who also took the stand, said that they were not aware that these were police officers. So we'll see how that impacts, of course, the jury's decision. If the jury, though, does find that there just isn't enough evidence to convict of first-degree murder, is that it? Does he just walk away, or is there a chance of lesser charges being put on the table?
Well, there's certainly other charges that could come from this. They have something called an included charge of manslaughter. Manslaughter means that he intended to strike the police officer. He intended to cause him some sort of harm, but he didn't mean to kill him. And I think if the jury is sort of in this fight because they don't want to maybe hold him accountable for murder, but maybe they're worried that they want to give some sort of justice to the victim's family, especially this police officer who himself was just doing his job. And I think that that's the real tension here, especially with so much media pressure and so many political leaders sort of weighing in on the situation.
Right, and you mentioned the media attention, the political leaders. We heard a lot of comments when Mr. Zamir was granted bail. It's not often that someone who's accused of killing a police officer and charged with first-degree murder is granted bail until their trial, and that's what happened in Zamir's case. And we heard a lot of outrage at the time when he was granted bail. Do you think that those comments back then will impact what we see possibly next week if the jury does come back with a verdict?
I think it's definitely going to be a factor to consider. I mean, this was a really sort of significant thing for the Premier of Ontario, Premier Ford, to come out and say that what we're doing here by releasing Mr. Zamir on bail, we're putting criminals ahead of victims and their families. And so what's that saying to the public? It's saying that this man is a criminal, and he said this not knowing anything about the facts of the case. Everything that was heard as part of the bail hearing wasn't released to the public. So these were really ill-informed comments. They were meant to undermine the presumption of innocence, the right to bail, even in a murder case. And I think it really started to put, Premier Ford and others put their thumbs on the scales of justice when they said that.
It is a very sad case on all levels here, of course, and we'll be watching as it sounds like the last witnesses will be called today, and potentially a jury will start deliberating next week. Daniel Brown, thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now it is 7:39 here on BT. Going to take a look at the forecast now and send things upstairs to Tash.